So in the last class, we had learned some of the Git commands. We installed the Git. You should be able to gain access to Git bash. We had done all that, right? So we had gone through some Git commands, and we all know how to do that in our previous class, right? If you still want to refresh your memory, go back to the recordings and go back also and read the PowerPoint slide that I sent. You should be able to know all that. So then we created a GitHub account, right? So I want to start from where we created a GitHub account, okay? So when you create a GitHub account, you can create repositories, right? And one of the ways to create repositories, if you go to click on this, this icon that has your name, you can go to your repositories. You click on your repositories. Once you click on your repositories, you can click new, right? When you click new, right, you should be able to create your repository. For example, you want to create this repository. Call it Windows 003, right? Let's create this repository. Now, I want to keep that repository public. Now, when you keep a repository public, it means that other people can access your repository, right? They can clone your repository, they can use it, they can collaborate with you, right? Alternatively, you can keep your repository private. When you keep it private, it means anyone that wants to access your repository needs to have the username and password to be able to access your repository. And you are the one to give them that information, right? If you want to access, you give them the information. If you want to keep your information private, you don't want anyone to access it, just keep it private. It is locked. But if you want to collaborate, if you want to share, you keep your repository public, right? And you always create a README file. README file is, for example, you're creating a code and or you're creating a project, right? Maybe it's a DevOps project, and you want to give people instructions, step-by-step instructions on how to follow your project. You have to put a README file, and that's where you put those instructions. Then you have the git ignore file, any file that you don't want any other person to see, like your secrets, like your confidential files, like your log files. You don't want to expose it for everyone to see. All those files needs to go into your git ignore file, and it's always .git ignore, right? All your files will start with a .log file, .secret file, all of those will have to go into your git ignore file. Then once you do that, you can create your repository, right? Click create repository and it will create a repository. And this is your repository. And in this repository, you can add files, right, to your repository, right? And this is how to add the files. You just click on add file, create new. If you have a file that you have somewhere, you can upload the file as well, right? If you have pictures, you can upload. For example, if you want to upload, let me see if I have any picture in, do I have any picture in here? Right, I'll have some, okay. Right, I can upload this picture, right? I can upload this picture, then I commit it, right? This picture is uploaded now, it's now in my GitHub repository, right? So you can upload your pictures into a GitHub repository, or you can create a file, right? You can create a file, a new file. For example, you can create this file, give it a name, right? My first file, right? And like we did the other one, maybe you want to do some git commands, right? Some git commands. For example, git add, git commit -m, then message. You put your message there, git checkout, git switch, right? And so on and so forth. Git log, right? Those are your commands. If you want to keep your information in there, once you do that, you can commit the changes. Write a commit statement here, whatever commit statement you want, right? And you can commit it to the main, this branch that you are right now, or you can create a new branch, right? When you create a new branch, you have to create what is called a pull request. I'll get into a pull request in a minute. Once you do that, you can commit your changes. Now, once you commit your changes, that changes are now in your GitHub repository, right? So there are people that all they do is they just work with this user interface. They create your documents here and they store your documents here. They can create their documents in a Word document and just upload it just the same way like we uploaded this picture, upload it to GitHub, right? And your information will stay here, right? But as a DevOps engineer, you want to interact between your bash, Git bash, and your GitHub, right? Because most of the things that we do has to do, some of them will be coding, right? Because developers will be coding and you may also need to push or pull or commit one way or the other. So you have to know the processes. So the question now is, how do I have created a directory? How do I capture this, my directory, in my local environment? In other words, how do I clone my repository in my Git bash, right? There's a command, there's a Git command called git clone. Git clone, and you can clone that repository in here. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So this is your repository. If you go in here, you'll see your repository. There's the repository Windows 003. And to be able to clone this, you need the URL. So either you copy this URL, or alternatively, this is always advisable. Come over here and click this little object right here. You will be able to copy this repository. Now, once you copy this repository, come back to your Git bash, come to your Git bash, and you can do git clone. Git clone, then you paste your repository right here. Right? It's cloning that repository. Now that repository is cloned. If I do ls now to see, now you see I have Windows 003 now. I can switch to that repository, Windows 003, right? And if I do ls, see the files that I created. This is the logo that I created in there, and this is the file that I created as well. So I have those in my local environment now. So what I just did, so we can continue from that. Collaborating remote repository. Okay, git clone. All right, this is how we clone. I'll show you how to clone the environment. I'll clone, but before we get that, I think we already did git mesh. Okay, collaborating with remote repository. Okay, so now I've shown you how to clone a repository, right? This is, you know, when you cd into the path. Okay, so let me see, you clone your repository, git clone repository. That's what I just did, right? You can verify that it's being cloned. So that's the command that I just ran. Let me see. You can clone. Okay, let's do a little bit tutorial of this one as well. You can clone into a specific directory, right? Which is what we did. You can clone into a specific branch, right? Git clone -b, that if you have more than one branch, like you have a main branch on your Git. Let me show you what I'm talking about, right? See, this is my main branch. This is the branch that I have, right? I can create other branches. I can create other branches here. So this is the main branch. Create a new branch. I can create a new branch here. Call this the dev branch, right? I have another branch now. I call it the dev branch. I can create another branch. I call it the production branch, the prod branch. Okay. Now, if I go back to my main repository, now if I look at this, you see I have the main branch, dev branch, and production branch. So what I'm trying to explain is, you can, when you're doing a cloning, you can clone into the dev branch or the production branch, or you can clone into your main branch. The default branch is the main branch. So when you do the clone, it goes straight here. So this is the command if you want to specify the exact branch that you want to clone into. So you do git clone dash the branch name. It could be any name, then the repository name. But it needs to have a flag -b, then the branch name, say dev branch. For example, we want to, so you can do git clone, right? -b, dev branch, then the name of the repository, which was, I can't remember what it is. Let me see. Yeah, this is my repository. Then this repository, right? So if I run this, I'm going to clone into the dev branch. Okay. All right. So that's that one. Okay. And this is an example. You can do a shadow clone as well. This is not, don't worry about this too. It's not used very often, right? But it's good for you to just know about it. Okay, so after that, after you've cloned your repository, right? You can make changes. You can make changes in your local environment. Now, when you make changes to your local environment, you want to push it back. So let me show you, I'll show you two things. One thing is I have the repository now here in my local branch. Okay, so let's see, ls. Now I have a file, and that file is my first file, right? I can make changes on this local machine. So if I make changes on this local machine, these changes doesn't affect the changes in my Git repository. So for example, let me show you what I mean. So okay, let me add one other Git. So Git status, right? Now I save and close this, right? Then I do Git add, right? Then I go Git commit, right? And this will take me to my staging -m, right? Added Git status. Okay. All right, that has been added to my staging, right, on my local machine. But that has not translated to my GitHub. So in my GitHub, if I come here, this is my file. So I don't have Git status here, right? So the question is, how do I get that changes automatically to come into my GitHub repository? So that's the question. How do I do that? Okay. Right, so you can do that. Let's go back to a PowerPoint. You use this git command, git push origin, then the branch. Now this origin, the name origin is a reference. Is what you want to call the your repository, right? That's the name that you want to call the repository. So you call it, by default, it's called origin. You can change it to something else. And I'll show you along the line how you change it to something else. Now, you do this because you clone this repository and the system knows that it was cloned. Now it has a direct connection and you can push this to your GitHub. So let's use the git push origin command and see if we're able to push this to the main branch, because the branch that we have here is the main branch. The branch here that we have is our main branch. So this is the default branch, and you see it is taking us is the default branch. So let's see if we'll do that, if that will work. Okay. Okay, let's go back to our git bash. So if I do git push origin is my reference, right? And I want to push it to the main. Let's see if this will work. Git push command should work. Git push origin, right? Origin, and let's push this to main or master or dev. Let's push this to dev and see what happens. Okay, that has been pushed, right? Now let's go back and see. Let's go. So these are dev, right? Let's refresh this real quick. Okay. Okay. Now it has been pushed. It has been pushed. Because it's been pushed, you won't see this right away because I have to do what is called a pull request. A pull request is because original, so for example, you were not the original person that created this information. but you want to update this information. Now, GitHub will not just allow you to push information into someone else's file that created. For example, if you are in a team of developers, right, and you're developing your own code, right, and you people are collaborating. Now, you're pushing this code, your code, because you are probably in a different branch. You want to push this code now to be merged in a main branch. Now, someone, maybe your lead, would have to look at, review this code before it matches. So you create a pull request. So you see this, it automatically created this for me, compare and pull request. So I will click this, come back here and click that, and it will give me an option to look at this. Now you can see, you see Git status now, right? Right, you will compare this code with every other thing. It's a way of reviewing the information. Once that information has been reviewed and says it's okay, then you create what is called a pull request. A pull request is also called a merge request. You want to merge the information that you've updated in your local repository with what you have in your GitHub repository. Now you can create a pull request, right? Click here to create a pull request. Now that pull request is open. And once you've given approval to go ahead, you can down merge the pull request by clicking here and you confirm the merge. Okay, now if we go back now and again, let's go back to that file. If we open that file now, it's been merged. Now you have Git status. Okay, so the process is, if you, okay, the first process, because we're doing a push now. First of all, we had clone. For example, if I give you a file now, you have to, first of all, fork your file. Okay, these are the process that we've done. Okay, so what I did, I sent you a file, right? And what you did, you forked that file. Once you fork the file, you clone the file to your local environment, right? Then you update the file. You update the file, right? What you're cloning is you're cloning the repository, which is also a directory. So the directory comes with the file. So the entire repository is being cloned, right? Then you have a file, you update the file inside that repository. Right. Once you update that, right, then you create a push, right? From that push, you create what is called create a pull request, right? The push would have you compare and create a pull request, right? And the pull request is being pull request. Always I call it PL, or you call it ML. So when you hear in the company say PL or ML, I've created an ML. Please, can you look at my ML? That's a merge request. They call it, some people call it pull request. The official name is pull request, but most people call it merge request, ML. So anyone that your team is using is fine as long as you understand what you're talking about. So ML will be reviewed, right? And the merge request, you can merge the request to your GitHub repo. Okay, so that's the step, right? Someone's have a file that needs you to fork, then you fork the file. That file becomes yours in your GitHub repository. Now, from that file, you copy the link to that file and clone that file. Now you clone it on your Git bash. So now it becomes yours on the local repository. Now you have it on your local repository and you also have it on your GitHub, right? Now, since you have it on your local repository and on your GitHub, you can update that document or information, right? You can update the file. Once you update the file, you can do a Git push, right? You can push it to that branch. It could be the main branch, it could be a dev branch, or whichever branch you want to push it to. Now, once you push it to that, you can create a pull request as well. Now, the pull request requires someone to go review that code before it creates a merge, right? And after that, it can merge. Now, what you've seen here, that's a push. Now, we can also do a pull on the GitHub. I've made some changes here as well, right? I've not committed it, but I can commit this. Now, I've made changes here, but this time around, since I've made changes, I do not want to clone it, go through the process of cloning. That's one way of doing it. You can clone this repository on your local environment. But if you already clone it and someone comes back here, maybe you're doing a collaboration and someone has come to the GitHub and make changes. How do you get that change in your local environment? Remember the other time we did the changes on a local environment and we push it. Now, this time around, we have to pull it. So we're pushing it. Now we have to pull it, right? Okay. So how do we do that? That's the question. Okay. This is how we do it. Let's go back to our tutorial real quick so we reference it. So you can use what they call the git fetch. And you can also use a git pull request. So one is a git fetch, and one is the git push. But what is the difference between git fetch and git pull? If I can, I think I had a diagram. This is my GitHub repository. It's not my local repository, right? And let's say this is, where's the laptop? Let me use a diagram for a laptop. This is my local environment right now, okay? Now, I want to push this. I want to push. I have a file down now I've created and I've made some changes. Now I want to pull this. This way. I want to pull it from my GitHub now to my local repository. But when I do a git fetch, the git fetch does not come directly into my local environment. Let's call it my local environment, right? It doesn't come directly into my local environment. It comes into, remember when we do, okay, let me remind you guys of this. When you do a git add and you do a dot, right? So that's you saving that document in your local environment. It's like you creating a Word document and click save, right? That saves that document, but it doesn't move it to a staging environment. So when you do git commit -m, then you put your message, whatever message it is, right? Now that moves it to the staging environment. So you have two environments here. One is stage environment, right? And another one is your local environment. This is the stage. Let me enlarge this so you can see well. Right. So when you do a git fetch comes into your stage environment. Stage environment is where you had your commit. Remember, when you do a commit goes into your stage, right? When you do an add is on your local environment. Now, when you do a git pull, here and paste. When you do a git pull pulls this document directly into your local environment. So this is git pull. So git pull will pull it directly into your local environment. Git fetch, right, will fetch it to your stage environment. But how do you get it from the stage environment to your local environment, right? That's where you do a merge, right? if you do a git fetch, you must do a merge to be able to merge it to your local environment. Sorry, this place is all over the place, right? You must do a merge, a git merge. You must do a git merge to be able to merge this into your local environment. But if you do a git pull comes directly to your local environment. It doesn't need a merge. Okay, does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay, if that is understood, all right, let's go back to our tutorial real quick. That would help explain. So first of all, you do a fetch because, okay, you add the original repository as a remote. This is, I've shown you this, how to add it, the repository if you want to change the name, okay? Now, you fetch the changes from the original repository using a git fetch. Now, because you have this new reference now you're fetching it because when you do upstream, it's referencing this repository. So you do git fetch upstream, right? Once you do git fetch upstream, now you have to do a git merge, right? Do git merge upstream / main, okay? Right, so the merge now will just merge it to the local environment, right? Okay, so let's go back and let's do this step by step so we can understand. Okay, so now I created, let's go back to, let's use this, right? So for example, now I want to, let me use git remote add. Then I want to call this upstream. Now, instead of origin, now I'm changing it now to upstream, right? Upstream, then the upstream represents, that's not what I wanted, sorry. By the way, now we are in the dev environment. I probably need to change this. Let's change it to, main, so we can work from main, okay? So let's do git switch. So now we are in the main environment, okay? Now I want to do git remote add, and I want to call my my repository upstream. So I'm referencing it, and I need to give the name of that my repository, the URL. So I can come here and copy the URL. Copy the URL from here. Okay. Okay, now I've changed that. So now it's upstream now. So now I can do git fetch. Git fetch upstream. Okay, I'm fetching that. So I'm fetching everything now, right, from my repository here that I just created, because I now call it upstream. So I'm fetching it now, right? So now it has come into my staging environment, which is depicted here. So if you follow the PowerPoint closely, right, it gives you step-by-step process. So this is the git fetch upstream, right? Once you do that, then you can do a merge, right? Now, there are two things. You can do a git merge and a git rebase. I think we talked about this early on, and I had showed you a diagram. What's the difference between a git merge and a git rebase? Now, you want to merge it into your main branch. So you do git merge upstream, that's referencing upstream / merge. So we can go back here and do git merge. What am I merging? I'm merging my upstream with my main, which is my main branch, okay? Right, so now if I do ls now, so the file I'm looking at is my first file, right? So I can vi into that. sorry, can VI into that file, right? Right. So now everything that I had in that repository, now I can pull it. So now I'm pulling. You can see I'm pulling it now. Now I can see it in the local repository, right? So one way you can is to clone, you fork your repository and clone it. Another way is to pull it, right? You can pull it and you can push, you can create documents in your local environment and push it. And you can also create a document in your GitHub repository and pull it, right? So those are two ways that you can create and you can push. You can push and you can also pull. So now we're pulling from, where are we pulling from? We're pulling from our main repository, and we're pulling there and we merge it to our main branch. From main branch in a Git repository to a main branch to a local repository, right? You can pull it from any branch and merge it to any branch in your local repository as well. Okay.